Welcome to Cream, Eggs and Jam,
a podcast for food nerds with show and tell by Elise Bulbrook and Scott Bagnell.
We love to cook with cream, eggs and jam and learn from food people who give a damn.
So join us each week for thoughts, tips and tricks with guests, recipes and more in the mix.
Episode 10, we are 10 weeks into Cream, Eggs and Jam. Scotty Bagnell, we are now officially quite the podcast makers, aren't we?
Double digits, if we may.
Welcome to today's episode. I'm coming to you from Warndu country.
And I'm coming to you from Yuggera country. And this week, like every week, we would like to acknowledge, firstly, the traditional custodians on the land in which we're recording this podcast and pay our respects to elders, past, present, and emerging.
Later in today's podcast, we will be talking with our friend Jess Hodge, who was a contestant on Masterchef Australia with us. She is a wonderful landscape architect and a very, very passionate cook.
And she's done this amazing trip all around Australia, which I want to find out. It looks incredible. I've got the travel bug. I want to go and tour Australia and see some of these amazing places that we're so lucky to live in this incredible country.
Absolutely, Scotty. Now, if I sound a bit off in this episode, it's because I have a cold, so please forgive me if I'm a bit nasally, I'm a bit slow, I'm a bit down. I have the flu. It's not the spicy cough, but it is a flu.
It's going around. You know what you need is you need some good soup.
Well, it's funny you say that. I have just gotten some pork trotters from the market. So I will be making ramen. Who am I inspired by? You. You posted a beautiful ramen recipe that you made earlier in the week, and it's inspired me to finally give the Momofuku one a shot.
Oh, yes. I am now on the ramen train and I'm addicted. I did this amazing ramen. It's probably not like textbook traditional. It's from this cookbook that I'm currently obsessed with. I should have got it. Written by Mandy, The Art of Escapism Cooking. And it breaks all the rules and it follows no tradition and it's inspired by many things.
That's fine. Ramen isn't a traditional food. Ramen is something that's new age Japanese food. It's constantly evolving and the recipe is very much up to the chef. There's not one recipe for ramen. So it is very, very fine to break rules when it comes to ramen.
Thank goodness.
Fun facts.
This recipe was so fun to make, but you know what? I haven't cooked a long process recipe like this for a while. I used to be obsessed with really technical, complicated recipes because I loved the challenge, but then coming out of MasterChef, everything is quick and fast and what can I do in 60 minutes? I loved this. It took me about 3 days to make this ramen recipe and the stock is divine. Like the most simplest stock. It's just chicken bones, chicken neck, and you get onions and you burn them until they're charcoal and you cook the chicken, water, onions, that's it, in a pot for 3 hours until the bones almost like disintegrate. And then you blend them up and then you cook that like sludgy stock for another 3 hours.
But
it's like it did look gross. Like there was several times Andrew gave me a lot of dirty looks. The house was smelling very chickeny and it didn't look pleasant. But then after 6 hours, you strain the sludgy mess and you get this beautiful white chicken stock that just tastes like liquid roast chicken. Like the taste in this stock is amazing because it's got all the bone and the marrow and all of that amazing flavour.
So that's why I got a message from you the other night asking about muslin cloth alternatives.
Yes. I went through so much muslin cloth straining this multiple times to get all the like fine liquids out or fine bones out. And your suggestion of a nut bag, nut milk bag, I think is a very good idea.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the commercial kitchen term is for these things. We didn't use them when I was working at the winery. We didn't use them when I was working at the wine bar. These things didn't come up.
And like you can't sieve this because it's so sludgy that you need to like exude a lot of force to get this stock out.
I wonder if you could pass it through like just a cotton tea towel.
Maybe, yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, that's
what old ladies would do with like a chicken soup, but this is more fibrous. This is, you've blitzed the bones.
Yes. But it's so good. And then you make this pork fat and pancetta and black truffle, like lard paste that goes in the bottom of the bowl, which you pour the stock over with this highly concentrated kombu, there's like a seasoning paste or seasoning syrup that goes in it.
Tare?
So it's kombu. Maybe. Yeah.
Something like that.
So good. Just salty goodness. Fish sauce, kombu, bonito, and shiitake mushrooms.
And when I saw your picture on Instagram, I saw that your egg you had a soft-boiled egg on your ramen.
Jammy
and I was like, that doesn't look like a nitomago egg, like the Japanese style ramen egg. But then I thought, no, Scotty's probably done one up. It was a truffle egg, wasn't it, Scotty Bagnall?
Yes, it was a truffle egg. Yes. It's so good.
When you do make ramen, you start the stock on day one, and you start your eggs on day one too. You marinate them. But you were ahead of the game because it's truffle season. We spoke about truffles last week.
Yes.
Oh dear.
So good.
So I'll go through the process of my stock with you after I make it. I haven't made it yet. We only got the trotters today. We'll probably be eating this come Sunday, but I'm looking forward to it. The ideal is that incredibly fatty tonkatsu ramen. I want to be drinking liquid marrow. That's the ideal.
Yes. So good.
About 5,000 calories a bowl, please. Thank you. That's who I am.
Are you going to make your own noodles? That's the question.
Well, you did. And you are ambitious. Me, making ramen noodles is tricky. You need to make an alkaline noodle. Did you do that? Did you make alkaline noodles? Okay.
No. This recipe has a bit of a hack, which was super interesting. It uses a combination of tapioca flour, which gives you the bounce and the chew, plain flour, and it flavors this with this roasted barley tea, which gives it this really beautiful nutty colour and flavour. And then
how did you find the tea? That sounds like an effort as well.
It was an effort. I had to go to several Asian grocers, but I found it. But really good flavour. And then it's got egg yolks in it, and you blitz it. But the dough that you get, and the recipe is great because it talks you through it, and it says, look, you think this is not going to work, but you just have to persist. It's going to come together eventually.
Yeah.
And it's really dry and crumbly, and you sort of knead it in plastic wrap. You let it sit for about half an hour, you knead it again, and it slowly starts to get sticky, and then you roll it out, and you've got to laminate it a couple of times, and it crumbles, but just magically, it then just comes together after laminating it a few times. But I had to roll it out, and the dough is so dense that I've actually bruised my hands from rolling it out. So I don't know what my tip would be to avoid that, but
so
look, it was
too
worth
firm.
it. The noodles were beautiful.
Too firm for a pasta roller. Is that what you're saying?
It went through the pasta roller, but you had to basically roll it almost to the thickness and then use the pasta roller just to take it down that little bit more.
Okay. I'm sick. I don't have the energy, you know?
Yes, it did take a lot of energy.
Yeah, I'm unwell. I need to conserve my stores.
Yes.
I'm going to be... I love recipes that are hands off. I don't mind slow cooking.
Yes.
I don't mind things that take time, but I've got other things to do. Like if there's something that is tedious, and I love to do that kind of thing with people. If I have to be by myself these days, I feel like, oh no, I'm wasting time. I've got a book deadline.
You do.
More specifically.
You do.
I've recently got an extension, but I can't negotiate any more of them. So
Right.
at the moment, me and my relationship with tedious pasta making, for example, it's not good.
Oh, no. Well, just buy the ramen noodles. They are
that's
equally
right.
delicious.
Yes. Scotty, I'm wondering, this week on Masterchef, I know Aldo went home on Sunday night. What was the challenge? What happened to him, the poor thing?
Yes. Look, it was a 2-rounder challenge, which is always difficult. But it was made better because the beautiful Hugh was there.
Oh, the beautiful Hugh. He is the executive chef of Vue de Monde and is a 27-year-old bombshell, like Prince Charming lookalike. Masterchef take that absolute up a notch as well, because they just go to town talking to him, saying you look like Prince Charming. And he does. I can vouch for that.
How does someone look so perfect? I don't know. But it was all of his favourite ingredients under some cloches. And you saw the first ingredient, but you had no idea what was under the second. So you had to decide whether you cook in round one with the ingredient you could see or take a risk with the ingredient you couldn't see. Interestingly, Aldo went for the ingredient he could see to start with, and that was a quandong.
Ah, there you go. Interesting. So Aldo was in the second round with Billy, and who else was there that didn't go so well in round one?
Julie had to cook in round two.
Oh, wow.
And she wanted to see the second ingredient because the first ingredient was lion's mane mushroom, which I love, but she'd never cooked with that before. So I think that's a good move. Like if you don't know the ingredient, risking looking what's under the second cloche, you may as well do that. But yeah, she found herself in round two.
Do you know what her second one was, the other ingredient?
Her second one was golden beetroot.
Oh, well, that's probably more friendly for Julie.
More friendly. She did a beautiful terrine with it.
Yeah, beautiful.
Very pretty.
Lion's manes mushrooms could probably have been used in a similar context. They're absolutely gorgeous. And in season at the moment, I know that they're definitely out in the wild down here in Victoria right now.
Are they really?
Yes. Big foamy looking things. They look like coral. They look like
They're
white
so
coral.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and they're very good for you. You slice them into steaks and you can marinate them.
Yes.
And they are an excellent... If you are vegan or vegetarian and you're looking to mimic the flavour and texture of meat, lion's mane mushroom is a good sponge upon which to add things to flavour your non-meat steak.
Yes.
There you go.
Yes.
Anyway.
So good.
So Aldo looked like he went home in round two with a cucumber dish.
Yes, he had to feature or hero cucumber in his second dish, which is a hard flavour to hero. Like it's a little bit nondescript and, what do you pair it with? It's not going to take over that flavour of cucumber. But his dish was beautiful. It was so stunning on the plate. And unfortunately, the reality is this is a competition and both Billy and Aldo's dishes were perfect. It's just Billy's was more perfect on the day.
Dear. So Billy had to champion wasabi. Now, I get all of my information from social media because I can't watch MasterChef. We've discussed this in previous episodes of Cream, Eggs and Jam. You'll just have to tune in and find out why. But Scotty fills me in. I'm wondering, Scotty Bagnall, what would you have preferred, cucumber or wasabi?
Well, I was eliminated on a horseradish, which is very similar to wasabi, so I was a bit triggered by this episode when I saw the wasabi. But that's an interesting question. Wasabi or cucumber? I would, now, knowing what I know and having time to think, I would probably do wasabi. Because it's
Yeah.
the same thing with horseradish. Like, when I got that in my elimination round, my brain went blank because there's just so many things that you're thinking about, and the pressure of everything, you just have that mind block. Now, every day I have like, oh, I could have made this, and why didn't I do this? And I love this dish with horseradish. You think about all these things that you definitely could have made.
Yeah,
but on
your
the
brain's
day,
not
you just
there.
freeze and you just go, whoa.
Yeah.
What would you have chosen?
Well, I didn't get to cook in the horseradish round that I sent you home. And on that day, I wanted to make a dessert. And I think I'm kind of similar in that like, if you did have, if the choice was cucumber or wasabi or horseradish, wasabi lends itself to dishes that might be a little bit more interesting, dare I say it.
Yes. Yep.
Again, competition setting, you've got to go with your gut. You've got to go with what you think could impress in the moment and what could potentially be better. And I think that wasabi or horseradish, those kinds of ingredients could be a little bit more versatile than a cucumber. But that's not to say Aldo didn't do well. There are some excellent cucumber dishes at restaurants here in Victoria, here in Melbourne at the moment. Some of the most, one of the most popular things that you can get, well, I say this because it's probably one of the most Instagrammable dishes, is a cucumber toast from the Carlton Wine Room.
Cucumber toast?
It's just sliced cucumber on toast with, I think it's like a creme fraiche, like a seasoned herby creme fraiche.
Okay.
Anyway, goddamn, it is Instagrammable and people are eating it. Anyway, so I probably would have done the wasabi and used it in a context of a dish that, you know, after challenges, a year later, far down the track, you think of the things that you would have done, you would have made. And I actually would have done a dessert. I would have done like a honey and lemon and horseradish dessert, and I think wasabi could work well in it. I make whipped honey, which isn't my recipe. I ate this in New York.
How do you whip honey?
Whenever I've travelled overseas by myself, I have dined myself, Scotty Bagnall. I have taken myself out to fancy restaurants and sat alone and had the best time. One of the restaurants.
I can't do that. I
my
can't
gosh.
do that. I feel really weird doing that, eating alone.
I
wish
love
I
it.
could.
It is like a dose of hospitality. It is medicine. Eating with you is very much like medicine. During Masterchef, our Saturday morning eating out experiences were like that for me, that dose of hospitality. When you eat with someone that can be reverent with a meal, it's very, very soothing. And I find my own company to do that also. So I ate this dessert at a restaurant in New York called Olmsted, and the dessert was their signature frozen yogurt with whipped honey, and it was honey that had been whipped with an ingredient called Versa Whip. So you just pop honey into a mixer with a whisk attachment fixed onto it and a little bit of Versa Whip and water, and you whip it for like 5 minutes, and you get honey that's like meringue-like. And then you can pipe it to mimic a soft serve frozen yogurt.
No.
Yes.
What is this Versa Whip?
Versa Whip is a emulsifying agent. But it's readily available once you know where to find your like
In
ice
Australia?
cream stabilizers, things like that. Yeah, I've bought it. Not from the supermarket, but like the kind of shops where you would buy your ice cream stabilizers from.
Okay.
Right?
Yep.
Melbourne Food Company, blah, blah, blah. When you put your spoon through the soft whipped honey and then the frozen yogurt, it's like you're having a mouthful of like meringue and the acidity from the yogurt. So I probably would have done the sweet honey, horseradish granita, a frozen yogurt, and maybe like some lemon curd. And I think like those flavors remind me of what you have when you have a cold. They go well together in that context.
Yes, they do.
Why not put them in a dessert? So
What
that's
if
my
they
idea.
didn't have Versa Whip in the pantry?
No, they did because I ordered it one
Did
day.
they?
I wanted to make it for so long. Even in the semi-final, in the semi-final, when I had to change my dessert because my parsley semi-freddo wasn't working, I was like, oh, maybe I should just make that frozen yogurt. Like, it was a thought in the moment. Probably should have.
Oh, no. Okay, moving on. I think we should talk to our guest today, Jess Hodge, who was part of our season of MasterChef.
Yes, we are talking with Jess, and our discussion will involve a discussion of native Australian ingredients. We love using them. We will be flagging some of the issues that are involved in the use of native Australian ingredients for chefs and consumers. And we want to acknowledge that when we eat or purchase or use native Australian ingredients, we are connected to people whose food security, food sovereignty, and whose livelihood, whose human rights have been at risk due to issues within our food system, within Australia's overall landscape since its acquisition. We are very, very grateful to be able to use native Australian ingredients in the way that we do, and we intend to celebrate them in a way that is conscientious.
We are joined by the amazing Jess Hodge from our season. Hello, Jess. Thank you for joining us today on our podcast.
Hello. Hi, Scott. Hi, Elise. So good to see you.
So good. I'm really excited to talk to you, Jess, because we haven't really caught up at all about what you've been up to over the past year. Where have you been? What have you been doing?
I think that the question probably should be, where haven't I been? Because pretty much since finishing filming for our season of MasterChef, I came home back to Sydney, decided I was not going back to work, bought a vintage caravan and took off with my family. And we headed north up the east coast of Australia, and the COVID situation in Sydney was not great, so we just didn't turn back. We kept going. So it ended up being about just over 10 months on the road. Travelled most of the way around Australia, including to the centre, which was fantastic. And sorry, Elise, we missed Victoria, but we spent a fair bit of time in Victoria when we were filming. So, and it's so close, so I can come back. But so 10 months on the road, just exploring Australia. That's what I've been up to.
That is massive. 10 months in a tiny caravan.
With 4-year-old twins. Yep.
4-year-old twins.
Yeah.
Oh,
we saw you,
goodness.
Scotty. We saw you, Scotty, early in the process, and I think that things were pretty calm at that point, but I think we were only about 2 or 3 weeks in, so we had a long way.
Yes.
A long way to go.
It was so good to catch up. We went to Spirit House, which is an amazing restaurant on the Sunshine Coast.
So beautiful. Such a lovely lunch, and one of the lasting memories actually of the trip.
Oh, yay.
Aww.
So what did you get up to in 10 months? I can't imagine traveling for that amount of time. Like, did you have a plan? Like, when you set off, like, did you have some hot spots that you wanted to hit in a time frame that you had in mind? Or was it just like, go where the wind takes you?
Pocahontas. Sorry.
To be super honest, we thought we might get to Byron Bay. We honestly thought we were heading up the coast, maybe go away for a month and then come back to Sydney and work out what to do. But coming back to Sydney really was not an option this time last year. Everyone went into lockdown, and we were so lucky to cross the border into Queensland before any of the lockdowns came into place. And at that point, we just really were feeling our way through it. We didn't know where we were going to end up, how long we were going to be away for, but we just kept going. And both my partner and I were working from the road. I took a little bit of time off, just trying to regroup and just kind of, I needed to process the MasterChef experience for a little while and decide what that meant for me moving forward. But eventually we decided that we had a few points on the trip that were decision-making points. One of those was when we began heading west from Cairns. So that was a big deal. We decided that we wanted to go to Uluru and see the centre of Australia. And at that point, we also had to decide if we wanted to go north to Darwin and continue our way around the country, or head south down into South Australia. And funnily enough, I had a very chance meeting of a beautiful woman in a campground in Alice Springs that helped make that decision for me, or for us. There's a wonderful woman who was a teacher at in a remote Aboriginal community at the border of Western Australia, South Australia and Northern Territory. And she came to chat with us because we were travelling in a vintage caravan, and you don't see vintage caravans in Alice Springs very often. And there's a very good reason why not. Our caravan lasted about another week after that day before it just died.
Oh, no.
But luckily enough, we had it. She came and spoke to us. She just bought one. She was from Albany in Western Australia. And she was on holidays, on school holidays, but we began talking about bush food, basically, native Australian ingredients, because I was cooking a native satay chicken or something along those lines, and I had all of my ingredients out, and she got talking to me and began to talk about a cooking school that she was taking her students to in Albany, which was happening in November of last year. And after a bit of a chat, she invited me along, and that really pretty much changed my life, I'd say, that moment, that meeting. It meant that we had a few months to get down to Albany, but it also meant that when I got there, I was able to cook with some incredible chefs. I got to meet Paul Iskov, who's known as Fervor. I got to meet some incredible students from the most remote parts of Western Australia, some places I didn't even know existed. One group of students came from the Mitchell Plateau, which is 12 hours drive north of Broome. So I didn't even know you could drive that much further from Broome.
No,
but you can.
I thought Broome was at the top.
Yeah, no, it's definitely not. So, and while we were there to help facilitate these wonderful children in kind of learning about the hospitality industry, I learned so much from them. I learned so much from the elders that they travelled with, from the teachers that they travelled with, and just the experience of being on country and cooking with ingredients that were from the southwest of Western Australia. It really just changed my mindset of how to approach food, and especially Indigenous Australian food. Meeting Mandy in the caravan park in Alice Springs, at the time, I don't think I quite realised how significant it was going to be. It certainly was a decision-making point where we decided to head north from Alice Springs up to Darwin and complete the loop. And it also meant that we travelled into Western Australia. We missed all of the border closures, which was fantastic, and got to experience the West Australian coastline, which I would go back in a flash. But I think that just having that chance meeting, and as insignificant as it was at the time, really, it really just set my path in the world of food, I think, in a direction that I don't think I'll ever be able to come back from.
That is so amazing. I have this belief that things happen in the world, in life, for a reason. Like, the universe connects you in some magical way, and just that chance meeting that you had made that decision in that exact spot at that exact time, cooking that satay, and then it changing your life, that is just so magical. I love it.
I agree with you, Scotty. I think that I don't know what made that happen. The fact that about a week later we didn't have that caravan anymore. She wouldn't have come to speak to us if we didn't have a vintage caravan. So it is quite a funny story. It's something I'll look back on and be quite grateful for. So, I mean, I probably could have sought out some of those connections myself, but it all just came to me all at that one time, and it really was something quite special. And then the week actually cooking at the camp with these wonderful children and their families and everyone else that came along was really just a special point in my, I guess, life as a cook.
That's amazing. Did it change your approach to using native ingredients? I think all three of us developed a love for native ingredients during our Masterchef experience. But I'm wondering, like, having this first-hand knowledge and interaction, and having the opportunity to cook on country with native people, has that changed your perspective in any way in terms of native ingredients? Like, what was the takeaway from that?
So when I started Masterchef, I was drawn to native ingredients purely from my background as a landscape architect. To me, they just made sense to use ingredients that come from the land that we're living on. From a sustainability point of view, from an environmental point of view. What I didn't quite understand was the social and cultural point of view. And I think that even while I was away on MasterChef, I don't think I understood that. And at the beginning of the trip, I don't think I fully understood that. I was primarily using native ingredients in my cooking, but mainly as flavour, which, I mean, there's no problem with that either. They taste delicious and they add a complete different dimension to the food that you cook. But it was through, I think that moment at that cooking school and really spending time with these the various people in Albany changed my understanding and appreciation of native ingredients and what they mean culturally, how significant they are for the communities in which that have nurtured these ingredients over thousands of years. And the knowledge that comes with those ingredients. What that experience enabled or changed, I guess, it was a shift in the way I was thinking about ingredients. I was no longer thinking about the native Australian ingredients as flavour. I was thinking about them as actual ingredients that could be core to a dish. So rather than just kind of throwing everything in to try and create a flavour that might be like something else, I was starting to appreciate them for what these ingredients were in their own right, starting to use more of the root vegetables and the fruits, and just appreciating what belonged to that part of the country that I was on and using what was local. And that really also helps with a connection to country, which is something that I'm beginning to appreciate a lot more, both from a food point of view, but also from a landscape architecture point of view. So something that I'm trying to navigate with in both worlds that I'm kind of working in at the moment. And I think that as a non-Indigenous Australian, trying to work out how to do that in the most sensitive way is probably one of the biggest challenges that I'm trying to navigate through at the moment.
Yeah, there are a lot of statistics out there regarding how many Indigenous-owned Indigenous foods companies there actually are. And as someone that likes to use native ingredients but needs access to them, you know, there's that whole issue then of, well, if I'm not growing them myself, who am I supporting when I purchase them? And what's their motive? Who are they? What kind of profiting is involved? And is there any kind of rent being paid? I'm wondering, what kind of challenges have you faced in that regard, Jess, now that you're back in Sydney? And have you come across any particular, I suppose, Indigenous food companies that you would recommend listeners look out for?
There are so many issues there, Elise. I don't even know where to begin with that one. I think the current statistic is something like 2% of Indigenous food companies are actually Indigenous owned, which is quite terrifying when you think about it. I think it's something that I'm still navigating through because accessibility is one of the biggest challenges, and kind of wrestling with being able to source ingredients from a company, and you do have to do your research to see which ones are actually contributing back to the communities in which the products are being taken from, and that's not easy at all because when you're working in food, you also need to be very conscious of profit margins and all of those sorts of things, which you don't even, which add just another layer to the way that we deal and cook with food. I work for a company now called Yerrabingan, which is an Indigenous design company, design advisory company, and I work very closely with the CEO when I'm developing recipes and developing just thoughts around this, and trying to navigate all of the things that you've discussed with a First Nations lens. So I'm forming opinions myself, but I also want to have a sounding board to make sure that everything that I'm doing is valid and not offensive, I know that there are people in the industry that are very protective of their IP and their knowledge, and I totally appreciate that. And again, I want to work with communities to, in a way that I can best support them. And that's not easy when you're starting out at all. So I think that there is a shift. There's a big shift. And I think as non-Indigenous chefs, we just need to be mindful of where we're sourcing ingredients from, and then how we talk about, I guess, using those ingredients in our cooking. So I'm not setting out to educate anyone on anything. I am simply trying to use ingredients because I believe in them from a flavour and a point of view that they can really elevate cooking and create different flavours and different approaches to food and challenge the way people also think about what they're eating. But I don't want to, begin educating people on how things were used once before or culturally what their significance is. So it's a very long-winded answer, and I think that's because there's no simple answer for that.
Not at all.
Yeah, I know. I was actually quite excited. I walked into a local big chain supermarket the other day, and I saw some Indigenous products sitting on the shelf and some Mabu Mabu products sitting on the shelf, which just makes me so happy for those two women. I met with Sharon of Indigenous in Mudgee, and I know that she has been just working in the food industry for so many years without the recognition that she deserves. And it's great to see, First Nations products sitting on shelves as opposed to some other big company trying to flog their products in a commercial sense.
There are so many different perspectives. There are people who believe in the intellectual property law protections that can be associated. There are people that believe that can be another white hegemonic construct imposed on Indigenous culture. So there are so many contrasting, so many contentious issues with it. If you've got the sensitivity that you've got, Jess, if you've got the understanding that it's an area that is delicate, but also an appreciation that there can be conservation through consumerism, we should be eating it. We should be celebrating it, perhaps. Yeah.
I think so. And if that then leads to a shift in the way products are sourced or empowering or enabling communities to, I don't want to use the word commercialise, but sell their products that are growing on their country, I think that would be a great outcome. Through my landscape work, we are actually early days on many master plans within the Sydney Basin area trying to embed native I guess, social enterprise within those master plans so that the community can come to site and they can, whether they decide to grow food that can be then sold commercially, but they have space on that master plan or within that site to do these things themselves. So it's very difficult, but again, I think it's that sensitivity. And in the same breath, I've met so many people around Australia who are so excited that we're interested in learning about the ingredients that grow on this country, and that we want to use them in our food as well. And so many people who are so generous with their knowledge, and I think that I just try and respect that in the work that I'm doing. I'm not trying to own it. I'm not trying to take credit for any of it. I do want to showcase it, and I love being able to expose more people to the beautiful flavours that come from the plants that grow on this land.
Yeah, I think, you mentioned education is so important in this in terms of, and, it's educating people in a range of different areas. Have you found, where do we start in terms of improving the education around native ingredients and access to native ingredients and how to use them? Have you found any any good references, any good websites or cookbooks, or how do we start that process?
I think, again, it needs to be First Nations led, Scotty. I think that just this morning I was looking at doing a walk on country with a local Aboriginal group. This was down on the south coast of New South Wales. Find your local Aboriginal Land Council. Find a local nursery. In Sydney, there's a couple. I'm now living on the Northern Beaches, and there's a place called Bush to Bowl, which is Indigenous owned, and they do bush food walks effectively. And then there's also Indigigrow in Sydney, and there'd be others all around the place. As I said, what I've found is people are actually very generous with their knowledge, and they do want to share this information. And I think it's important to go to the source. I think that getting secondhand information or people trying to teach you how to cook with these ingredients, you're not going to be getting genuine and necessarily culturally appropriate kind of information from them. Doesn't mean it's not going to taste good or be right, but I think that it is important to go to the source if you can. There's some fabulous cookbooks out there as well, but again, just look at who the authors are. So there's the I'm about to go to the Flinders Ranges actually to be involved in the Quandong Festival, which is run by the guys at Warndu, which is awesome. So that's it is partly Indigenous owned, but there's certainly a lot of fantastic knowledge in their books. And again, this is going to be an opportunity for me to cook with Indigenous chefs, work alongside them, learn about specifically the Quandong, but we'll be cooking with a range of different ingredients, and again, celebrating the Quandong, which is it's a beautiful fruit, but celebrating that in this special festival, which is in Corn, which is part of the Flinders Ranges.
That sounds so incredible. Cool. I've only just realised down the back of my place, there's a creek that runs along, and it is full of quandong trees, blue quandongs. So I was doing a walk the other day, and there was just the footpath was covered in blue quandongs. They're literally like 5 meters from my house. I'm like, this is amazing.
Is the season
but I don't know what
now?
to do with them.
When will they be ready?
The blue quandong season must be about now, because I was foraging for them in North Queensland about this time last year, a bit later. So I'd never cooked with blue quandongs before, but I cooked them down and turned them into a bit of a chutney or a jam. They're quite different to the red quandongs. They're much more citrus in flavour, and I paired it with the burrata, and it was very very
yum. Okay, I'm going foraging in my backyard.
Whereas the red quandongs that's quite tart but not citrusy, and they are more peachy in their flavour. So
cool.
and they're probably a bit more versatile in terms of using them in sweet foods. So very, very interesting. I think I'm going to eat a lot of quandong pies, and I can't wait. And it's going to be quite fun again to work with professional chefs that are just are working in this world. And I'm still learning. I think I'll be learning forever when it comes to these ingredients, and I'm quite happy to do that.
Yes. Between the three of us, we each live in very different climates. Scotty's up in the tropics of Queensland, not the complete tropics, but tropical North Queensland, tropical Queensland. Jess, you're in New South Wales. I'm in Victoria. I'm wondering if there are any native plants that you would encourage home gardens to include, and is there anything in particular that would suit a range of different climates, or perhaps there's something that would suit Scotty's backyard more than mine, and something that would suit my backyard more than Scotty's? An edible recommendation, of course, please.
What is fantastic about native plants is that they're actually quite adaptable. So they and versatile. So of course, there's going to be things that will grow better in some places compared to others, but generally speaking, there are things that will grow everywhere. So up sort of on the north coast of New South Wales, you get things like finger lime that will grow up near you too, Scotty. River mint and those sorts of things. I've just learned. I was wondering why my river mint looked dead in my backyard, and I just discovered that it's deciduous. So you'd think that as a landscape architect I would have clued on that things that go brown in winter probably are deciduous, but I think up your way they probably wouldn't be. At least they probably wouldn't do so well down near you.
I've seen it. I don't know how young the plant was though. You know, sometimes when someone puts something in and it does quite well for the first month or so.
It's amazing.
Yeah, there's a community food justice farm near me that has river mint. That's why
fantastic.
I don't have it growing, but I was thinking maybe it could be a good idea, but maybe you're saying it might not be. I don't know.
Planted in spring, I think. So,
Okay.
there's, what else do I have? The myrtles kind of grow most places. So lemon myrtle's obviously one that everyone knows about, but there's cinnamon myrtle, there's anise myrtle, which is just beautiful, both of them. I've just recently heard about a plant called a curry myrtle, and it's just like a curry leaf, but it's a native tree. I couldn't tell you the botanical name, because I'm the worst landscape architect around, but I need to get my hands on one and just try it in place of curry leaves, because I think that would really round out my. I love making native curries, and that would just really top it off.
That sounds so good.
Warrigal greens grow everywhere. Things like harcala and pigface grow everywhere. Saltbush seems to grow everywhere except for Sydney. I can't find it. I mean, here, I think that's just more a function of Sydney being such a developed city. So, whereas you don't have to go far out of Melbourne to find saltbush on the beach and everywhere around Australia, for that matter.
Yes.
There's some things that are a little bit more complicated to grow, like quandongs are much more complicated. They're semi-parasitic, and they need to be, loved and nurtured. There's just so many, and there's so many plants that you wouldn't even realise were edible, but they are. So, there's the obvious things that fruit, and there's the obvious things like mint that are like a herb that you can pick, but then there's so many other things like this will only, I guess, appeal to the listeners that know their plants, but things like lamandra, which you see basically planted along roads and in car parks, you can actually chew on the root of the lamandra. It's something that I've specified on projects for years and years without realising that it was edible. Oh, wow. I've also recently come across a native lime, which I didn't know existed until recently, and I was just gifted a bag of them from a beautiful friend who came to my dinner the other night. So there's just, it's endless. It truly is. And when you travel around Australia, the species that you find that are more prolific will be different everywhere. So Central Australia, you'll find the bush tomatoes. I don't know. It is place specific, but there are those kind of the warrior plants that will grow anywhere. The last one I'll mention is the native raspberry, which is indigenous to northern Queensland, but it is weirdly adaptable and can grow most places. So it's just like European raspberry. I don't know at what point in evolution it's split, but they're so similar. They're just a little bit less sweet, and they're the most beautiful fruit that you'll come across. And there's people up in Mareeba, which is in the Atherton Tablelands, that are growing them, and it's just amazing.
Oh, wow. You used many beautiful native ingredients in a dinner you recently held. I'm wondering, Jess, if you could walk us through your menu. What was it like? Unfortunately, Scotty and I weren't able to come, but we would love to live vicariously through your wonderful descriptive language.
So just last week I had my first ever pop-up dinner. So I'm very lucky to know some people in the hospitality world in Sydney, and they basically let me take over their kitchen in their Mexican restaurant in Darlinghurst last week. I was so nervous, but it was such a fantastic experience for me. As it was a Mexican restaurant, I wanted to not divert too far from their branding and their theme. So the restaurant's name is La Farmacia on Stanley Street. But I also wanted to bring the Jess touch to the dinner. So we landed on a 5-course degustation, which was, and I don't want to say the F word being fusion, but it was effectively a blend of Mexican and with Australian native ingredients. They work so well together, and if anyone remembers back to my signature dish that got me the apron on Masterchef, it was actually a Mexican dish that, and at that point I was just dabbling in native, so I did use some in that dish, but I just had the opportunity to elevate that last week. So 5 courses, everyone arrived to a plate of fried saltbush sitting on their tables, which had tahi, which is a Mexican seasoning, and I think that really set the tone for the night. So everyone, it was like someone had just walked out to the saltbush bush in their backyard, fried it and put it on the plate. So everyone was just encouraged to pick the leaves. It wasn't presented in any sort of fancy way, but that really, I think it was depicting that blend of the two cultures. Something that I've always loved is seafood, and Australia has some very beautiful seafood, and I tend to cook a lot with it just because it's familiar. It can be sustainable and it's so beautiful. So started with the barramundi tostada. So you hear about cured fish a lot. Not often do we use barramundi, but that was cured in a pepperberry and bush tomato mix. So for those who don't know bush tomato, it's a very savoury flavour. It actually has I guess a flavour profile very similar to Vegemite. So it's quite mind-blowing. I actually used a little bit of Vegemite in that one too, just to elevate that flavour. But I wanted to use ingredients that people would be surprised by. So that was one example. The next course was an aguachile, which is quite a common Mexican dish, but rather than using chilies, I use pepperberry. So pepperberry is a bit like Szechuan pepper, in that it creates this very kind of warming kind of chili kind of, it develops slowly when you're eating it. So you take a first mouthful and you're like, that has no spice at all, and then over time it begins to develop, and it can, don't get it on your fingers because it'll burn your eyes if you rub them. It's just like, but it also brings this beautiful colour. So I paired that with watermelon. So the purple of the pepperberry, the pink of the watermelon was quite a stunning dish. And that was served with prawns, which is, again, quite a classic Mexican thing. Tacos, very Mexican. And it was one of my first real experiences cooking with emu. So emu's not super accessible to the majority of people, but there are some game butcheries in Sydney, so I was able to source some emu, and I made that in an al pastor style, so very thinly sliced emu with some pineapple and the flavours that you normally get in al pastor, and also a wallaby barbacoa, so slow cooked wallaby shanks that were cooked in the native spices and then served with the consommé, which is quite traditional from in a Mexican sort of setting. I remember being in Mexico City. We were invited to a family's house and they served their barbacoa with consommé, and it was their hangover cure, effectively. It was a Sunday morning meal. So,
oh my gosh, yum.
Yeah, and then, I served a kangaroo asada, which is basically just grilled kangaroo, which was just beautiful, if I do say so myself. And my octopus, which was my signature octopus, along with some elote, which is corn served with a smoked compound butter which had local honey and some finger lime in it. So really just trying to complement flavours and that smokiness, the earthiness of all of those ingredients. And then dessert was a Geraldton wax granita and a strawberry gum horchata, which was effectively set like a panna cotta. So and a ancho chili wattle seed caramel sauce. So in total, it was a 5-course degustation. I think I worked out that they were 10 dishes in total. So that worked out to be like 800 dishes.
800 dishes
out of the kitchen.
Oh my gosh.
Over 2 sittings. So yeah.
How did you find navigating through service? Because that can be a very intimidating experience. Where were you? Were you at the pass? Were you cooking? What was it like?
That makes it sound like this kitchen was organised, that we had I was working with some of the chefs at La Farmacia. So it was my concept, and I sort of led the prep, but during service, I was very much guided by the head chef at La Farmacia, who is obviously experienced in doing dinners such as this. So, and I'm so grateful, because I would have just been a mess. It was a very small kitchen, and with so many dishes and so many, just mapping out the tables. When I was on MasterChef, I was actually eliminated after the first service challenge, so I didn't get to experience it like some of you guys who stayed on a bit longer. So it was my first true service. And we had 2 sittings. The first sitting we were running about half an hour behind, which turned out not to matter so much, because everyone just had a few drinks while they were waiting for the second sitting. And the second sitting went perfectly. So I think it just shows that practice makes perfect. And
yes.
We got in the swing of things by the second round. So
absolutely.
It was a challenge, but gosh, it was a buzz at the same time. So it was so much fun.
Real life service with chefs is better than a MasterChef challenge. I'm just putting that out there. The service challenges in MasterChef weren't like real life service at all. They were horrible.
So maybe blessing I got eliminated after the first ones.
No, well, we weren't guided. We weren't shown what to do. It was make it up as you go. And those of us that had like a natural instinct did well. But when you are given an opportunity to work in a kitchen with chefs that do this for their profession, you learn actual tricks of the trade that, you're like, why didn't I realise this? Well, it's because you don't do it for a living.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's incredible knowledge to be passed on in an environment that learning can happen in. MasterChef was not a learning environment. It was a sink or swim environment.
It was a reality TV show. Yep. So we were all contestants willingly. So.
Off you go. Have fun. No.
TV for us.
No. The reality of hospitality is so different. MasterChef creates the illusion of hospitality being wonderful, blah, 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 but it's not even an example of what it's like. Given your recent experience in a commercial kitchen, is it a space that you love? Is it a space that you can see yourself doing more pop-ups in? Or what does that world hold for you now?
I'm at the point in my life where I'm now trying to navigate how I can move more into food. So food for me has always been about stress release and mindfulness, and coming back to Sydney, and I've gone straight back into my work as a landscape architect, and albeit I'm working in a much different space, in a world that's blending the Indigenous food with landscape, blah, blah, blah. But that last week's dinner just cemented that I need to be doing more of that, because the joy that it brought me was like unparalleled to what I'm doing in my career as a landscape architect. So yes, the short answer is yes, there's going to be more. I'm looking at something a little bit more permanent. I won't drop too many details yet until it's actually confirmed, but just follow me on Instagram and you'll see what's happening. Yes. There will probably be more dinners similar to the one last week as well. So, and that's something I definitely want to be doing. But for me, there's always going to be this kind of background of social, cultural landscapes sort of underpinning everything I do. And hopefully I'll find that balance between food and working in this world as a landscape architect.
I love talking with Jess, and catching up with her over this podcast feels like a bit of a tease. I want to eat her food. I want to go to Sydney, Scotty.
I know. I really wish I could have made it to that dinner. It sounds amazing, but I'm sure she's going to have more. And the next one, you and I need to be on a plane and there, I reckon.
Yeah. I think we also need to acknowledge that Jess is such an inspiration. I'm so jealous that she's been able to explore her creativity in a way that she finds so rewarding. I want that happiness in my life.
I know. I'm so in awe of her creativity and the way that she approaches food in such a considered way, I think is beautiful. And she's such a lovely person, and I'm so glad that we got to talk to her.
Yes. I might make a panna cotta now. She's got me.
I know.
She's got me
Yes.
wanting to make a delicious panna cotta. I actually have some Indigi Earth products in my pantry.
Oh, gorgeous.
So, Jess, you have inspired me in ways that you may not have realised. I have now got plans to make a panna cotta using some Indigi Earth products that I have in my pantry that I purchased from Sharon, and I might also use an ingredient I received in the mail.
What did you receive? Is this show and tell?
This is my show and tell.
Ooh, I wonder what it could be.
I also wonder what it could be. I received an email from the Australian Chestnut Co. And
That was just a way of putting you off the scent.
yeah, I was like, I haven't ordered any chestnuts. I haven't given the Australian Chestnut Co. my mailing address. This is a surprise delivery. And I thought, no, a friend has been involved. I received a delivery today. And this was the box.
Oh,
the box
look at
says
that.
Mountain Yuzu. And immediately, who else would send me anything other than Scotty Bagnall, who is the one and only person I know who is a yuzu enthusiast.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So is it a box of yuzu?
I opened the box. I'm like, oh, it's yuzu. And it is not yuzu. It is not. I call Scotty and I'm like, so I received something in the mail. Was this you? He's like, yeah, what was it? Anyway, they're beautiful bergamot. Beautiful,
Fresh
beautiful.
bergamot.
And oh my gosh, I'm so excited to use these. Thank you so much, Scotty. This is a wonderful surprise. Now I have to send you something that's just as exciting. I don't know what it's going to be because this is unreal. It's a gorgeous box. There are 3, 6, 9, 12 or 15 bergamot in this box. And I've never worked with them before. I don't even know what I'm going to be slicing into. Never.
This is exciting.
Never.
They're so rare. Like, you never see these. Like, yuzu has started filtering into, like, Asian supermarkets and stuff during yuzu season. You could probably find them. I have never seen fresh bergamot ever anywhere apart from Jane's Amazing Farm at yuzu, Mountain Yuzu.
So, like pressing my nose into this fruit, it's like smelling an incredibly citrus-heavy Earl Grey tea. That's what it reminds me of. Oh,
yes. A slice of this in an Earl Grey tea right now for you could be very good. Bit of honey,
sounds fantastic.
A slice of fresh bergamot, Earl Grey tea.
Oh my God. There are preserved fruits in honey at my local Asian grocery shop in their tea section. They've got big jars of things like quince in honey, for example. I'm wondering if I could chop up some, or maybe one or two, and just put it into a jar of honey and just see how long it sits. Maybe just the rind. I'll infuse some honey with bergamot.
I do that with yuzu, and it's insane. Like,
In the
finely
honey?
sliced up, finely sliced up yuzu in the honey. Mm-hmm. It is amazing. I have never tried it with bergamot.
I might julienne the rind. I'll julienne the rind. And then I can use it in my Earl Grey or like as an extra citrusy burst. Another idea is to make like a lemon crisp biscuit.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yum.
With bergamot.
Oh,
my God. I'm just so excited about it.
There's definitely like a lot of flavour in the rind. It's very similar to yuzu. Like the main fragrance is in that rind. And if someone's never... it's hard to describe the flavour of a bergamot. Like it's quite floral. And it's probably like vanilla, a little bit of like almost lavendery sort of floralness.
If you're an Earl Grey drinker, the smell of this fruit will make you salivate. I love an Earl Grey. It's like a luxury tea for me because it's a tea that I've drunk in my adulthood. It's a tea that I've chosen. I buy it. Me, the adult that buys her own tea. We never had it in the house growing up, so it's a luxury. Yeah, I love it so much. Oh, thank you.
Yay! And the juice is really yummy too. I don't find it has as much flavour in the juice, but it's super citrusy and sour and it's divine.
I also want to bathe in it.
You know they do that with yuzu. They put like whole yuzu fruits in the bath.
Yes.
That's the thing, so...
I have a book. It's a book of sacred bath recipes.
Oh,
and
yes.
It gives you recipes for adding different herbs or infusion ingredients into your bathtub.
Whoa.
Yes. Imagine all of the wonderful things in a Lush bath bomb, for example, but you just like grab them yourself and add them to the bath. That is what this cookbook is about.
I love this. Maybe we need an episode on bath infusions.
I can talk about bath. I actually worked at Lush when I was 18 to about 22, 23. So I do love a good bath. Oh. Anyway, thank you, Scotty. I'm so happy about this. I have to get you something.
Very welcome.
If you're listening and if you know something that's growing in Queensland right now that I should get delivered to Scotty's house, send me a DM on Instagram. Help me out. Andrew,
I love it.
if you know anything that Scotty wants, or maybe I need to get something shipped up from Melbourne. That could be also an idea.
Well, they come from Melbourne, so I've shipped the Melbourne things to you.
Oh, gosh. What's your show and tell?
Look, my show and tell is... I don't have any, like... I ate all my ramen. That would have been good show and tell. But I do have two of my favourite cookbooks for native ingredients. And Jess actually touched on both of these. Okay. And I thought these would be really good to share because if you're wanting to cook with native ingredients, I think these two texts are fantastic in terms of learning a little bit about the native produce and giving some examples of how to cook with them. So the first one is this beautiful book by Warndu, Good Food. And it is a beautiful book written by Damien, Coulthard and Rebecca Sullivan. Amazing cookbook on native ingredients. And I love it so much. And they're doing some really fun things around the place. Highly recommend that one. And the other one, and I'm so jealous that Jess got to cook and experience this, is the Fervor by Paul Iskoff. Ooh. And this one is amazing. So this is the chef that Jess actually did some experience with in her travels. And it's got one of my favourite little recipes, which I love to make. I don't know whether you can see
Sandalwood nut crackers.
These sandalwood nut crackers are one of my favourite things. They're super simple. They use tapioca. So the tapioca pearls that you just boil in water and creates this like really sticky mess. And you roast up some sandalwood nuts, finely slice them, and then you mix them through the tapioca, spread it on a baking sheet, and you dehydrate it and you dry it out really super thin. And then you deep fry it, and it's like prawn crackers.
Oh my God,
and then you can do all sorts of yummy little salty dressings on top. I do like a faux bacon one, which has got all sorts of yummy like smoked paprika and salt and things like that. And it's like this beautiful little prawn cracker.
Delicious. You might need to send me that recipe. I don't have that book, and I have I think I
this
have
book
all
is
the
gorgeous.
ingredients. I have some sandalwood nuts that I've stashed since MasterChef, and I don't know if they have an expiry date. They probably do. I need to use them.
No! Well, make these. Like, the hardest part is just dehydrating, but it just takes time. So there's no labour.
Oh, beautiful.
So that's good.
Yes. Well, thank you for your show and tell, Scotty. I think that something that was really valuable that Jess mentioned is knowing your author. When you are buying any book, that's a really good piece of advice. You do your research about who's written the book, understand what their expertise is. That gives you a little bit more confidence in what you're actually going to be absorbing. So that's
Yes.
a lovely piece of advice from our friend Jess. Scotty, it's been wonderful talking with you today.
I have thoroughly enjoyed it, as always. I hope you feel better next week. Have a
too.
good lie down, a cup of hot bergamot tea, and I'll talk to you next week.
Talk to you next week. Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to Cream, Eggs and Jam. I'm Elise Pulbrook, and you can find me on Instagram at Elise_foodperson.
And I'm Scott Bagnall, and you can find me on Instagram at @SSBagnall. If you'd like to send us your show and tell, you can email us scottyandελise@gmail.com.
Or if you'd like the visual experience of this podcast, you can find us on YouTube at Cream, Eggs and Jam.
Have a great day.
Happy baking!